It may not be at the most convenient time on the college football calendar, but Wednesday's early signing day is the first step into laying the foundation for a successful 2025 and beyond. And maybe the second step in that foundation is the transfer portal. So these 2 weeks are very, very important for Big Ten football programs. Which teams around the Big Ten were able to take that first step forward with a successful signing day? And what were the major headlines from the early signing day? I break it all down right now.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
The college football calendar is an absolute mess. What's going on this week? Oh, just everything. We've got early signing day. We've got kids hopping into the portal. We've got conference championship games. We're talking about college football playoff as well. Literally everything under the college football sun is going on right now. I just wish there was a little bit more spacing between these events, but here we are. This is the world that we've certainly created for ourselves, but you gotta have the staff to deal with it. You can't just complain. You gotta find a solution. If you are a team in the Big Ten or if you're any sort of college football team, you gotta be able to have guys on your staff that can do multiple things, that can multitask when you got a lot of things going on right now, and that's exactly what's happening on. All right, let's dive in to signing day. Let's kind of start first with a conference-wide headline, and I talked about this when Bryce Underwood flipped his commitment from LSU to Michigan. This might be becoming the conference of quarterbacks. At the very least, now that these folks have signed on the dotted line with their schools, this might be the start of what might be the conference of quarterbacks in the future. The foundation is certainly being laid right now. And of course, when you talk about these signees this year, you got to talk about Bryce Underwood, man. I talked about him a couple of weeks ago and maybe what it means to Michigan. You can go check that out, certainly on the channel and on the podcast feeds. But when you look at Bryce, this is a talent like Michigan has never had before, right? They've had those pocket passers. They've had good quarterbacks. But when you look at a Bryce Underwood type of talent, this is the total package, right? He has that dual threat ability. A lot of people have compared him to Vince Young. He can make a lot of throws with a lot of zip, certainly down the field. I'm just very curious to see who Michigan hires now as their new offensive coordinator, now that it was announced that Kirk Campbell is not coming back. Tavian St. Clair, the five-star Ohio kid. The thing about all of these quarterbacks that's very interesting to me is that they all committed really to nearby schools, right? Their hometown type of schools. Tavian St. Clair, Ohio kid, staying in the Buckeye State, and he's going to Ohio State. He's got a ton of mobility, and he's got a great ability to also throw on the run. When I turned on his tape, I was very impressed. When he moves outside of the pocket, he was very accurate when he was able to throw on the run, and he was very confident when he was able to throw on the run. When I look at Tavian, who's obviously a fantastic talent, one of the best quarterbacks in the 25 cycle, I start to think about what post-2025 is going to look like. Of course, you had Julian Sayin, right, who came in this year as a freshman. A lot of people were talking about him. A lot of people were excited about him. You got Aaron Nolan, right, in this group as well. Lincoln Kienholz is still in this room as well. There's just a lot of bodies. There's a lot of really good talent in this quarterback room. Everybody's not going to stay in this quarterback room. Like, we all know the climate that we certainly live in right now. But when you got Julian Sayin and Tavian St. Clair battling out, that's going to be very interesting just to see how these dominoes all fall in Columbus, Ohio. Let's talk about Husan Longstreet. He might have the strongest arm in this class. I'm not the only one to say that as well. When you watch him, and he's got a good amount of mobility as well. I think one thing when I kind of look at a lot of these quarterbacks, they all can move around. They all can scoot. They have all got, most of them really have some dual threat to them, some more than others, but we know Husan Longstreet certainly has that ability to move around as well. But man, you take a look at his arm strength and his ability to just put the ball 30 yards on a dime and just those darts across the middle. That's what I was really impressed with when I turned on the tape here. He's going to be in a quarterback battle, I think, next year. And look, when I look at all of these freshman quarterbacks, I'm just saying, don't rush them. there might be a situation, and Husan Longstreet, if Jaden Mayava is the quarterback next year, there might be a situation where USC might find themselves where Husan is really learning the playbook. He's really adapting to this Lincoln Riley offense. And later on in the season, maybe that's when Husan possibly takes over at USC. But I'm very intrigued to see just how quick he's going to be able to get on the field in Los Angeles. Let's talk about Malik Washington. This is probably the biggest out of all of these quarterbacks. He's got the size to certainly be able to be a Big Ten quarterback. Signee with Maryland, 6'4", 215 pounds, a really big body, very athletic as well. Now, when I talk about maybe some of these quarterbacks sitting, waiting, and learning, I think Malik is someone that could certainly benefit from that. I think he could use some development. I look on his tape, and there's certainly some situations where he could certainly take some time to learn, because the college level, right, every level you go up, it's going to be a little bit faster. I think Malik is going to have to adjust to the speed of the game, but I see a lot of really good raw talent from Malik Washington. The thing is, when you're at a Maryland instead of a USC, instead of an Ohio State, instead of a Michigan, and you have the talent that Malik does, there's going to be more pressure to get him on the field sooner. We'll see if MJ Morris is able to develop into a quarterback that's going to be able to compete and win the starting job next season as the veteran next season for the Maryland Terrapins. But that's just something to keep in mind for Malik. I think there's going to be pressure for him to get on the field in College Park, Maryland. And then you have the flip, one of the flips for the Oregon Ducks, Jaron Kavawe-Sagapula-Tele out there. Look, when you're a quarterback in Hawaii that sets records and you're the Hawaii Player of the Year, you go to Oregon, right? With all due respect to the Golden Bears over there in Berkeley, we talk about Marcus Mariota and Dylan Gabriel and all of that tradition where kids, great quarterbacks from Hawaii, at least most of the time, go over to Oregon. The Tagovailoas, of course, did not. But when I look at Jaron, he throws the ball with a ton of zip. I read an On3 article that said, he might be the gunslinger of this class, and I definitely see it. He's got a quick, very quick release, and he can get the ball from point A to point B 20 or 30 yards down the field extremely quickly. Maybe quicker than anybody right now in this class. He throws with a lot of confidence. And then when you kind of start to look at some of these other quarterbacks, then that's where you get to Achilles Smith Jr., a 4-star, had been committed for a while to the Ducks, and now Oregon has 2 of these guys sitting in the room right now. I think Dante Moore is going to play for 2 years at Oregon, but I think the future, it's in good hands with either one of these guys. I think these guys are going to go out there and they're going to compete. They're going to put it all out in spring practice and see who develops. I'm not sure if a couple of years from now we're going to see both of those guys in Jaron Kavawe-Sagapula-Tele and Achilles Smith Jr. on the Oregon roster, but hey, that's how this all shakes down. When you talk about some other quarterbacks, you got to talk about Carter Smith, a 4-star guy at Wisconsin. He kind of headlines the Badgers class right now. Now, he's that dual threat type. I'm not overly sold on his throwing ability right now. I think he's certainly maybe a better runner than a thrower right now, but I think with some development, and it kind of depends what Wisconsin is going to run offensively, right? They don't have an offensive coordinator, certainly right now, but when you look at the Badgers, they got Landon Locke in this class as well. They got Mabry Matoyer the class before. Like, at some point, you're going to have to develop a quarterback. And we'll see if any one of these 3 guys can be the guy for the future for the Wisconsin Badger. TJ Lateef, another 4-star guy. He's going to Nebraska as well. And one other one to note, a guy who actually is not going to be a Big Ten quarterback. UCLA had Madden Iamaleava committed, I think, since the summer. I think that was a big Deshaun Foster move right when he came in. But they lost him. He went over to Arkansas. So the future, we know we've got Justin Martin at quarterback for UCLA going forward. But what exactly does the future look like beyond that for the Bruins, I think, is something that they've certainly got to discuss. But the 4 of the top 5 quarterbacks in the 2-4-7 rankings signed with Big Ten schools. You're looking at half of the top 10 when it comes to those 24/7 sports rankings as well. So it's very clear clear that the Big Ten is certainly laying a great foundation at the most important position. All right, let's dive into some team-specific topics and how some teams really did, especially at the top of the Big Ten. Oregon is inevitable, folks. Dan Lanning is inevitable. They are that recruiting power. They are Texas. They are Ohio State. They are a top 3 recruiting team, no doubt. Last season, the class of 2024 was the first Big Ten recruiting class for the Oregon Ducks. They finished with the top class, and they did the same exact thing because of some big-time flips, back-to-back cycles with the number 1 class in the conference. Dan Lanning is establishing himself as one of the top recruiters, certainly in all of college football. You should not be surprised. I know maybe a reaction when you see this Oregon class is, whoa, look at what they were able to do on signing day, but I don't really hold that reaction. I've kind of come to expect this now. He pulled off a lot of flips last year. He pulled off some really significant flips this year in this class. So I think that this is going to be just commonplace, certainly, going forward. Now, when I look at everything in this class, we talked about the quarterbacks coming in for the Ducks, but the perimeter is what really stands out to me. They recruited well in the defensive line last year. They didn't go as heavy in the trenches this season. Of course, you got to talk about the wide receivers, DeCorian Moore out of that Texas powerhouse down there in Duncanville. You got Dallas Wilson coming out of the Tampa area, like 2 5-star wide receivers. And this is a big-time thumbs up to Junior Adams, the wide receiver coach. He does a great job at recruiting kids. He does a great job at developing great wide receivers as well. Look at what they were able to do with Troy Franklin, who's now playing for the Denver Broncos. Look at what they're doing with this group as well, with Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson the last couple of years, and Trayshawn Holden, right? The wide receiver level of play and the level of talent they are bringing at Oregon has certainly gone up multiple facets, multiple levels, I should say, since Dan Lanning and Junior Adams have come into Eugene, Oregon. But man, the defensive backfield is going to be absolutely loaded. Trey McNutt, the 5-star safety, was committed for some time. You got really high 4-star corners in here as well. Top 50, top 75 type of players in Brandon Finney at corner, Dorian Brew at corner as well. But the big flip of the day, 5-star corner Naeem Offord out of Birmingham, Alabama. Right, there was a 1-2 cornerback commitment for Ohio State for a long time. Offord was one. Of course, they had Devin Sanchez. Devin Sanchez signed on the dotted line today for the Buckeyes. But this flip, Auburn was also involved in this possible flip as well. But man, you look at those 5 guys. That is a hell of a class back there in the secondary. On this year's team, the 2024 team for the Oregon Ducks, they have all seniors, right? They have all seniors across the board back there in the secondary. So they're a very experienced group. They went out, they got Aaron Flowers last year as well. And then what they were able to do this year, the future is certainly bright in the back end of the secondary for the Oregon Ducks. I'm going to go into way more detail coming up tomorrow. I'm going to have Justin Hopkins, Scoop Duck it on 3, and we're going to be talking more about Ducks recruiting over there. So stay tuned for that. Let's talk about the Michigan Wolverines. You know, under Jim Harbaugh, Michigan, I think, had a certain level of where they were at recruiting-wise. It is crystal clear that Michigan is going up a level. They're graduating, certainly. Michigan, kind of the last handful of years under Harbaugh, in 2024, they finished 16th in the country, 18th in 2023, 9th in 2022, 15th in 2021, 10th in 2020. This is the best recruiting effort, rankings-wise, since 2019. On3 had them as high as 6th in the rankings. I saw 24/7 Sports had them at 7th in the rankings. You're looking right around 6 top 100 players, depending on what service you look at this year. It's very clear that the collective and Dave Portnoy and all these people are investing in bringing bigger talent into Michigan. Look what they were able to do under Harbaugh, taking high 4-star type of talent and developing it into 1st and 2nd and 3rd round NFL draft picks. What happens now when you're able to take the talent level to another level? Michigan says, yes, 7-5 no longer. We're planning on staying around the 10-win level. And you have to do that. You have to invest really into this recruiting at this type of level to be able to hang with the Oregons of the world. Of course, we talked about Bryce Underwood before at the quarterback position. Andrew Babaloa, a 5-star offensive tackle out of the state of Kansas. You got to have a tackle to be able to protect him. Certainly, those were kind of the two big wins of this class for Michigan. But now when you start to look at the future for the Wolverines, you know, you're starting to see something that's formulating. You're starting to see what an offensive lineup might look like in a couple of years. The 2024 class and the 2025 class are starting to build a foundation of the Sharon Moore era of Michigan football. We talk about Underwood in this class. Jordan Marshall, the top 150 running back out of Ohio from last year. He got on the field a little bit this year. They're really excited about him. How about wide receiver Andrew Marsh out of this year's class? Because Bryce Underwood needs some weapons to throw to, right? They need to upgrade at the wide receiver position. You look at Andrew Marsh this year, 6'1", 175, a long stride. He's deceptively fast, can get open. I wish his quarterback was a little bit better on film. He constantly underthrew him, so I don't think we were able to see just how fast he was. But once Andrew got the ball, he in open space, he was able to make one guy miss, two guys miss. He had a great job to be able to get to the open field. Very impressed with certainly his tape as well. I talked about Babaloa over there at tackle. Andrew Sprague was a 2024 4-star kid that they have. A couple of really good tight ends. Hogan Hansen, you saw him in the Ohio State game from the 24 class. And then you got Andrew Olish from the 25 class, a top 100 tight end, a 4-star, high 4-star type of kid, certainly over there. So you can see this Michigan offense on the recruiting trail certainly coming together, and you know they're going to plug some holes in the transfer portal certainly as well. Let's move on and talk about the roller coaster that is the USC Trojans and what they've kind of gone through the last 6 to 8 months or so. Remember, Julian Lewis was committed. Remember when they had Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson, those two 5-star defensive linemen out of the state of Georgia, and then they decommitted, and now they're going back to Georgia. They had a really good wide receiver out of the state of Utah in Jerome Miles. He decommitted, and now he's going to Texas A&M. And then they got Husan Longstreet, who we talked about before, and then Jakeem Stewart, an absolute freak. 5-star defensive lineman. Sure, would have loved to have 2 5-stars? Absolutely. But having somebody like a Jakeem Stewart is priceless, especially for Eric Henderson and what he's trying to build on the defensive line, and Danton Lynn, the defensive coordinator, certainly right now. But as I mentioned, he is just a super freak. He can overpower people with his upper body strength, but he's got a tremendous burst off of the ball as well. Remember, they had a kid that they really like in Jade Abasiri, who came out of Minnesota in last year's class. They got Cameron Fountain, right, who's on that defensive line as well. USC is laying the foundation, laying those building blocks. It's going to take some development. Development is going to be the key for some of these prospects. Jakeem Stewart is certainly one of those guys that has to be developed. Let's talk about the depth of the Big Ten right now. You got 10 out of the top 30 classes in the country are Big Ten teams. Nearly all of the Big Ten has a top 50 class. 14 out of the 18 teams are in the top 50 right now in college football. So there's a lot of depth certainly right now. Let's talk about Iowa. Right? When you don't usually talk about Iowa on signing day, right? They sign a lot of 3-star kids, and they are just the kings of development, right? Especially on the defensive side of the football. But they got another one. They got another one, folks. High 4-star Yosei Epinesa. If you've heard that name before, it's because there has been a long track record of Epinesas going through Iowa City. Of course, A.J. Epinesa was great at Iowa playing in the National Football League, but he's an Epinesa. Yeah, he's a big-bodied kid. He's got a lot of explosion off of the football. He's a great defensive lineman, great pass rusher. He's going to fit extremely well into Phil Parker's scheme, and Iowa has been able to peck highly rated defensive players as of late. We go back to Xavier Wampa as well. I think Aaron Graves was a 4-star defensive tackle, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So Iowa's been able to peck these guys, but for Iowa, it's all about fit. It's all about culture. They're never going to win huge recruiting battles or recruiting wars a majority of the time. They're looking for guys that fit them. And a lot of times it's maybe kids that aren't as highly recruited, but they just fit into the Hawkeye way. Let's talk about Nebraska as well. There was a lot of talk about Jeremiah Jones, and on 3 4-star. They were able to keep him as well. They flipped Dawson Merritt, an edge from Alabama. So the edge position is very interesting for me for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They lost Jamari Butler to the portal. They lost Principal Uman Mielen to the portal as well. So they're going to need to kind of replenish that edge room. There's a chance that we could see Dawson Merritt maybe on the football field in 2025 for Matt Rule's squad. Let's kind of finish things off talking about the Wisconsin Badgers. Look, for all of the talk about, I know Phil Longo's not the offensive coordinator anymore, but for all of the talk about Wisconsin changing a little bit, when I look at the recruiting classes, I see a lot of the same. I see offensive line, I see running backs, and I see defense. And the class of 25 is just another example of that. Back-to-back top 25 recruiting classes for Luke Fickell. That's certainly not the problem. The problem is development. We'll see if they can do that. But, they went heavy on the offensive line this year, headlining the class 2 4-star offensive linemen in Hardy Watts and Logan Powell. They had 2 4-star guys last year in Kevin Haywood and Emerson Mandel. So they're building and structuring a really good and Wisconsin type of the offensive line. We'll see if they can develop that into Wisconsin offensive lines of old. Like Darian Dupree was a high 3-star, low 4-star running back last year, and look what he was able to do to be RB2 this year. Dylan Jones was a more highly rated running back last season, so they have 2 good running backs. They've been able to recruit the offensive line. It's typical Wisconsin of old. Just some programs are just able to recruit a certain type of player. When I look at Wisconsin, it's offensive line, it's running backs, it's linebackers, it's defense. Mason Posa is somebody that they're really excited about, a 4-star linebacker certainly in this class as well. So I'm very intrigued, like Michigan, to see what the Wisconsin Badgers do from the off and who they hire to be the next offensive coordinator. I think that's going to tell you a lot about what this team is going to look like in the future. All right, signing day is in the books. How did your team do, and who are you most excited to see in the Big Ten in the future? Which true freshman do you think can make an impact on the field in 2025? Leave all of that in the comments below. I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.